Welcome. My name is Beth Hendricks, and I'm the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Colorado. The 104-year-old League of Women Voters is a political, nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in our democracy. The League works to increase understanding of major policy issues and influence public policy through education and advocacy. While the League advocates for positions after extensive study, it never endorses or opposes candidates or political parties. The views expressed this evening will be those of the candidates, not of the League of Women Voters or its partners. The League regularly hosts events such as this to allow Colorado voters to make an informed choice when filling out their ballot. Again, the League of Women Voters neither supports nor opposes the candidates. We hope that your time spent here will help you make informed decisions when voting during the 2024 general election. The partners for tonight's forum are the League of Women Voters chapters from Adams County, Larimer County, and Greeley-Weld County, as well as Colorado Community Media, El Seminario Dual Language Newspaper, and KUNC. Before we begin, I'll ask you to listen as I review League guidelines for candidate forums that ensure you have the most time to effectively hear from your candidates. This forum is not a debate. The purpose of this forum is to inform voters through respectful questions and listening. The candidates will appear in alphabetical order by last name for introductory statements. The order will then rotate. Candidates will have 2 minutes for opening statements, 1 minute to respond to questions, and 1 minute for closing statements. In fairness to each candidate, time limits will be strictly enforced by the moderator. The moderator is responsible for enforcing time limits, respectful engagement, and ensuring candidates stay on topic. He may interrupt candidates if he believes they are straying from the subject. The moderator has the authority to mute candidates if they do not conform to forum guidelines. Forum questions were solicited from League chapters and partner organizations and screened by a committee of League volunteers and partners. According to League guidelines, as well as the Federal Election Commission, candidate forums cannot be recorded, photographed, or broadcast without the explicit permission of the League of Women Voters of Colorado. No portion of the candidate forum may be used as part of campaign materials. www.411.org is your best source for voter information. It points you directly to the candidates and issues you will be voting on, with information about your voter status and more. It's also one of the spots where a video recording of tonight's forum will be posted. Remember that we vote by mail here in Colorado. Ballots for the election will be mailed out beginning October 11th and must be returned by Election Day, November 5th by 7 p.m. If you haven't received your ballot by October 20th, please contact your county clerk's office. You may leave your filled out ballot at a designated drop box or at a polling center, or return your ballot through the U.S. Postal Service. If you choose to mail your ballot, please be sure to mail it before October 20th, October 25th, and verify that you have the correct postage. Need help finding a drop box or polling place? Vote 411 can help. Before I introduce our candidates and moderator, I'm sorry to announce that our Spanish language interpreter had a last-minute issue and had to cancel. So unfortunately, tonight's forum will not be interpreted live in Spanish. We will add translated subtitles to the video recording that will be posted to Vote 411 and the Colorado League's website at lwvcolorado.org. We'll also distribute to all partners for posting and sharing. As an organization committed to justice, including language justice, we apologize for this. I'm pleased to introduce the candidates now. Candidates, please feel free to wave. Yadira Caraveo, Democratic Party. Gabe Evans, Republican Party. I'll now introduce our moderator for the forum. Lucas Brady Woods is the government and politics reporter for KUNC, the NPR for Northern Colorado. Lucas covers the Colorado congressional delegation, state legislature, governor, and elections. Welcome, Lucas.
Having me. We will start with our candidates' opening statements. Candidates will be called in alphabetical order for this and have 2 minutes each, starting with candidate Caraveo.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Beth. And thank you to Colorado Community Media, to El Seminario, to KUNC for hosting us today. And thank you to Representative Evans for being here and engaging in this forum. Since there is no Spanish interpretation, les quiero dar las gracias a todos por estar aquí esta noche. El seminario en particular por cubrir las noticias de la comunidad latina en Colorado por tanto tiempo. It has been my honor to be the member of Congress for the brand new 8th Congressional District for the last 2 years. This is a brand new district that is incredibly diverse, not only the most Latino district in Colorado, but also the youngest, and encompassing areas from rural really down to very urban and suburban Commerce City and Thornton. I was ranked one of the most bipartisan freshman members of Congress because I am working with both parties on common sense solutions to a wide variety of issues, whether it's lowering cost of prescription drugs, addressing issues within the immigration system, tackling the drug crisis head on, and standing up for farmers and ranchers across Colorado. This Congress, I passed 3 bills on the House floor with broad bipartisan support. Just last week, I passed a bipartisan bill that will advance pipeline leak detection, which is critical for safety and environmental issues here in Colorado and across the country. We have more than 45,000 miles of pipelines in our state, and this bipartisan legislation really reflects the needs of Colorado. In fact, I was the first freshman member of Congress to have a bill signed into law in this Congress. This law will tackle the next wave of the drug crisis head on. I have been making sure to vote in a bipartisan manner because that is a Colorado value that is incredibly important to me, and I look forward in answering your questions.
Thank you, candidate Caraveo. Candidate Evans, 1 minute, 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Lucas, and thank you to the League, to El Seminario, to KUNC, and to Colorado Community Media for hosting this forum. Thank you, Congresswoman Caraveo, also for coming tonight. Gracias a todos por venir anoche. 3 years ago, I was a police officer. I was a police officer in the Denver metro area because I love my community, I love my state, I love my country. I'm married with 2 boys, and I want to make sure that they have a good, safe place to grow up as well. I'm a police officer, or was a police officer, because after serving in the military, U.S. Army and Colorado Army National Guard for 12 years, I wanted to give back to my community. And that's why I'm here tonight. Because when I started my law enforcement career in 2011, Colorado was still 31st in the nation for our crime rate, solidly below the national average. Right now, we are unfortunately the 3rd most dangerous state in the country, more dangerous than California, Washington State, Oregon, Illinois, New York State. I watched that happen. It didn't happen because cops don't know how to do their job. It happened because of a bunch of far-left progressive policies that handcuffed law enforcement, allowed criminals and drug dealers to move into our communities with effectively no consequences. And because of that, that's why we're now the 2nd state in the nation for teenagers overdosing and dying on drugs like fentanyl. That's not okay with me. So I ran for and won my state house seat. I've represented Adams and Weld County down at the state capitol for the last 2 years. I've got almost 60% of my bills passed, and that's with me being in a super minority. I have 2/3 of the mayors in this district have endorsed me because they know that I'm going to give them the representation that they need, and that's what I'm looking forward to doing in Congress. You can learn more about me at my website, electgabeevans.com, electgabeevans.com, and thank you again to all for coming tonight.
Thank you, Candidate Evans. We will now start with the main portion of this evening's forum, prepared questions developed by League of Women Voters members and Colorado community media. Candidates will have 1 minute to respond to these questions, and the order of candidates will rotate. We'll start with Candidate Evans for the first question, since Candidate Caraveo went first for the introduction. Candidate Evans, what are your legislative priorities if you are elected?
When I'm out knocking on doors and talking to folks, I hear the same things over and over. Crime's out of control. We need to secure our southern border, and the cost of living in Colorado is just untenable. And so I'm looking forward to working on those things by doing a couple of things. We need to secure the border. As a police officer and a soldier, I know how to do things like that. We need to get the cost of living under control in Colorado. We've had one of the highest rates of inflation of any state in the nation. Our housing affordability is just off the charts, being too expensive. And that happens because a lot of red tape and overregulation, predominantly in our energy and transportation sectors. I'm looking forward to empowering the American economy again so that folks can get good paying jobs and actually be able to afford these things while bringing down the cost of living for everyone in the state. Finally, again, I'm focused on making sure that we have safe communities. The fact that we're third most dangerous in the nation is unacceptable. As a police officer, I can fix it.
Thank you, Candidate Evans. Candidate Caraveo, you will have 1 minute. What are your legislative priorities if you are reelected for your next term?
I too am hearing from my constituents on a daily basis about the cost of living. In Colorado, we have had this issue for longer than the rest of the country, which saw rising prices because of the pandemic. That's why in the state legislature, I focused on bills to make sure that we were reducing the cost to renters and other people around housing. And in Congress, I have supported a number of laws that are going to look at tax credits to build affordable housing and to make housing affordable for individuals. In fact, I just passed or introduced, I should say, a package of laws that are looking at cost, not just around housing, but around water, around childcare, and a number of other costs that are plaguing Colorado voters and that have not been addressed in the Republican-controlled House. I've also introduced a package of immigration bills, and most importantly, we need to give women the right to say what they are going to do with their own bodies, something that the Republican House has taken away.
Thank you, Candidate Caraveo. Second question, we will start with you, Candidate Caraveo. And again, 1 minute for each of these questions. How will you support safe, secure, and accurate elections? Do you trust Colorado's system, which has been called the gold standard, and why? Two-part question.
Colorado absolutely has the gold standard in election laws in the country. The fact that we can vote by mail, that we have made voting as easy as possible for citizens across Colorado is incredibly important and something that we have to secure and maintain. We also have to make sure to give people confidence in elections again. We've had a former president that has called into question the results of an election and refused to peacefully transfer power after a presidential election. We need to continue to talk to individuals about why it is that our election system is so secure and what we need to do in order to enfranchise voters to make sure that they have that right to have their voice heard. That is why when I was in the Colorado State House, I made it easier for a translation to happen for ballots across the state and made cleanup bills possible for other issues to make voting even easier in Colorado.
Thank you, Candidate Caraveo. Candidate Evans, same question. How will you support safe, secure, and accurate elections? And do you trust Colorado's system, which has been called the gold standard, and why?
Yeah, I predominantly trust Colorado's system. I've actually toured the system. I've sat down with our county clerks and recorders, and they've walked me through how they ensure that we have safe, secure elections. And so I do trust those, but I know that, having worked for the government for 22 years in between the military and law enforcement, I know there's always room for improvement. A couple of years ago, we had the Democrat Secretary of State here in Colorado accidentally mail out 30,000 registered to vote cards to folks who weren't even citizens, weren't legally allowed to vote. And so making sure that we do things like ensure that only citizens vote is going to be something that's very important. And unfortunately, my opponent just voted against ensuring that only citizens are allowed to vote with a bill in Congress that would have allowed states to verify that when somebody registers to vote, they are in fact a citizen. This isn't voter ID. This is saying when you register to vote, a state is allowed to ask if you are a citizen or not. And so I will ensure that we continue to support things like only citizens voting and talk about how we do have safe, secure elections here in Colorado.
Thank you, Candidate Evans. Moving on to the next question. Third question. Candidate Evans, you will start with this one. Again, 1 minute. What is your position on a national abortion ban? And please explain why this is your position.
I've been very clear since day one. I don't support a national abortion ban. The Supreme Court returned this back to the states. As a cop for 10 years, as a soldier for 12 years who swore to uphold and defend the rule of law, I believe this is up to the states. I don't support a national abortion ban. My wife and I have had 2 kids. We've had also 8 miscarriages. And so I know how critically important it is to ensure that women have access to things like reproductive health care. And unfortunately, nobody can tell my wife why she has this continued chronic recurrent miscarriage. And so I'm focused on making sure that we are promoting more healthcare options for women that actually give them the ability to solve some of these critical problems. My voting record is 100% clear on this, and unfortunately, so is my opponent's. She has repeatedly voted for and supported taxpayer-funded abortion up to the moment of birth with no questions asked. She's voted to take money away from the military and use it to pay for abortions. I'm committed to common sense and collaboration.
Thank you, Candidate Evans. Candidate Caraveo, same question. What is your position on a national abortion ban? And please explain why this is your position.
I absolutely oppose a national abortion ban. I trust women to make decisions for their own health and about their own bodies in a way that apparently my opponent and his party do not. When I voted to protect service members' right to reproductive health care, it was because it was being attacked by individuals in the Republican Party who do not think that female veterans or current service members should have the right to decide what to do around their own health care. When I voted to preserve the right to an abortion in the state's legislature here, it was because I think that women and their doctors should be making these decisions around health care. End of story. My opponent has said that he is not comfortable talking about abortion issues because he doesn't have the right parts. Well, as a doctor, I can tell you that I was in the room with women making these decisions that are incredibly hard and that need to be kept between them and their doctor.
Thank you, Candidate Caraveo. Next question, our fourth question, we'll start with you. Access to affordable healthcare remains a national problem. What are some measures that can be put in place to enhance access and reduce healthcare costs?
Well, my voting record there speaks for itself as well. I introduced many bills in the state legislature, both looking at the cost of the amount of money that Colorado was spending on primary care and making sure that we boosted that. I made sure to start a board that looked at prescription pricing so that Colorado could say enough is enough. It's time that doctors and patients are in the middle of healthcare decisions and not insurance companies or not pharmaceutical companies that are making millions of dollars off of their health conditions. And so we have a board now in Colorado that will be able to look at prices of prescription drugs and say, we're not willing to pay that for that. I made sure to support a bill in the state legislature and now in Congress so that insulin is capped at $35 a month so that our seniors can not have to think about choosing between insulin and choosing between the food that they are eating every day. So I have fought pharmaceutical companies. I will continue to do so for Colorado.
Thank you, Candidate Caraveo. Candidate Evans, same question, 1 minute. Access to affordable health care remains a national problem. What are some measures you would put in place or support putting in place to enhance access to healthcare and reduce costs?
When I was flying helicopters in the Middle East, we had a really simple saying. If it works, let's do it. If it doesn't work, doesn't matter how well it briefs, let's not do that thing. And unfortunately, the policies that my opponent have talked about have not actually made healthcare more available or more affordable. We've seen 4 health insurers pull out of Colorado because of red tape and overregulation in the last couple of years. Healthcare premiums for everyday Coloradans have gone up by double-digit numbers, and it is because of red tape and overregulation. I sit on the Legislative Audit Committee at the state capitol, and I can tell you right now, because of that red tape and overregulation, tens of millions of dollars are being siphoned away from things like Medicaid that should be going to doctors and patients, but they're not. And so by cutting that red tape, overregulation, I can get tens of millions of dollars back into the system without having to raise a penny more. That's what I support. I support putting doctors and patients back in charge of their own health and cutting out the bureaucratic middleman.
Thank you, Candidate Evans. Moving on to our 5th question and climate change, which is important in the 8th district. What federal measures would you support, starting with Candidate Evans, what federal measures would you support to create resilience to increases in drought, fires, severe storms, and rising sea levels?
So when I was flying Black Hawk helicopters for the Colorado National Guard, one of the mission sets that we did all the time, unfortunately, was fighting wildfires. We know that wildfires are a major contributor to carbon emissions and other sort of air pollutants that can increase temperatures. And so one of the most important things that we can do here in Colorado is just have better management of our forest. We talked all the time in the wildland firefighting circles about reducing fuel loads. We need to reduce the fuel loads in our forests, do a better job of managing those. And then the other thing to talk about when it comes to the climate is understanding that if we're worried about global climate change, we need to take a global response to that. And that means produce more stuff here in the United States because we have the best, most environmentally responsible regulations and rules of anywhere on the planet. Our natural gas, for example, is 40 to 80% cleaner than Russian natural gas. Let's build it here rather than having folks in Europe rely on dirty Russian natural gas.
Thank you. Candidate Caraveo, same question. What federal measures would you support to create resilience to increases in drought, fires, severe storms, and rising sea levels?
Well, climate change is a real issue here in Colorado. We see this every day with the fact that there is no fire season anymore. It's year round. And with the air alerts that we get on our phones every single day. I certainly saw it as a pediatrician when I couldn't see the mountains. I knew that I would be sending a lot of kids to the emergency room that day because they were going to have trouble breathing and asthma exacerbations. I've continued on the work that I did in the state house in Congress by making sure that I fought against my own party when it came to natural gas exports, when the president decided to put a pause on these because it is clean energy and we need to be pursuing all of the above in terms of our energy security here in the United States. I told him that was a mistake. I have in the Agriculture Committee introduced a number of bills that look at water conservation. And like I said earlier, passed a bill through the House on pipelines that will be really integral to the transportation of water.
Thank you, candidate. Next questions, the next 2 questions are on foreign policy, starting with candidate Caraveo. Should the United States continue to offer military assistance to Israel in its war against Hamas and Hezbollah?
You know, I've been to Israel twice. The last time, 6 weeks before the October 7th attacks. I was at one of the kibbutz where children died. Israel has an absolute right to exist, and it has a right to defend itself. At the same time, we need to continue to focus on a two-state solution. Make sure that the humanitarian crisis that is developing in Gaza is addressed, because as a pediatrician, I cannot tell you how heartbreaking it is to see and hear about children dying of starvation and of medical conditions that really should be treated, including neonates who are not getting the care that they need in hospitals. I have been a steadfast ally of Israel. I have voted to continue sending military aid to them so that they can continue this war against a terrible terrorist organization. And my opponent had a person working for them that made anti-Semitic comments, and he did not immediately come out and condemn them.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Evans, same question. should the United States continue to offer military assistance to Israel in its war against Hamas and Hezbollah?
I spent the better part of a year in a combat zone with Iranian missiles aimed at me in my airfield. And so I know that the Iranian regime is one of the, if not the leading sponsor of terrorism in the world today, to include Hamas and Hezbollah, both of which are designated by our US State Department as terrorist organizations. And so as a veteran of the global war on terror, I know that we need to stand by our most important ally in the Middle East, which is Israel. They're the only fully functioning democracy in the Middle East. And it's absolutely imperative that we stand by them and that we ensure that their right to exist is protected. And Israel has the resources and the freedom to be able to chart their own course. I've spoken out against anti-Semitism here at home. My opponent made that comment. That individual who worked for my campaign was let go within 24 hours. And it would have been nice to see some comments from my opponent when there were protests that were taking place in Colorado at her alma mater about anti-Semitism. I spoke out against that. I will always stand by Israel.
Thank you, candidate. Another foreign policy question, starting with candidate Evans. Should the United States continue to offer military assistance to Ukraine?
So in Ukraine, we have a couple of different things that we have to do. Under no circumstances can we reward a rogue dictator like Putin. We must ensure that Putin knows his behavior is absolutely unacceptable and it will be fully opposed. We also need to make sure that any aid that goes to Ukraine is tracked to make sure that it's used appropriately and that we give the aid in an appropriate manner to make sure that it can be used efficiently and effectively by the Ukrainians. As a military veteran, I know one of the most important things that you do in military strategy is what's called massing your forces. If we are going to continue to provide Ukraine with resources, we need to ensure that we allow them to mass that. That means give them what they need in order to be able to make decisive headway against Russia. Don't dole it out a little bit over a time. And so I support opposing Putin, and I support making sure that if we choose to continue to provide aid to Ukraine, we do it efficiently, effectively, and we make sure that the money and the resources are going where they're supposed to be effective.
Thank you. Candidate Caraveo, same question. Should the United States continue to offer military assistance to Ukraine?
I voted for a supplemental security package that was held up in the Republican House because of fights over politics that really put Ukraine on their back foot, unfortunately. We were luckily able to restore that aid, and I will continue to support Ukraine's ability to defend itself against an entity and a person, a dictator, who is trying to take down a democracy. The United States has to continue to be steadfast in its enforcement and its protection of democracies across the country. I've done that in terms of funding to Ukraine. I've done that in terms of funding to Israel. And we have made sure to continue the planning process in case China were ever to attack Taiwan.
Thank you, candidate. We'll start with you for the next question, moving back to some domestic issues. The current farm bill is tied to many Colorado issues, including some outside of agriculture, like leasing parcels of public land for housing purposes here in Colorado, for example. Do you support or oppose the farm bill? Please explain your position, starting with candidate Caraveo.
Well, I voted for the Republican Farm Bill in the House to get it out of committee, one of only 4 Democrats that did that on the entire committee. And it was because I have spent the last year and a half hearing about the struggles that farmers and ranchers in my district and across Colorado, because I am the first member of the House to represent Colorado in the Agriculture Committee in over 10 years. I am making sure to bring their concerns to Congress. In fact, it's why I recently got an award from the from the National Farm Bureau, I should say, and why I have such great relationships with the Farm Bureau, with the Farmers Union, and with so many farmers and ranchers across the state who have seen that I'm investing not just in what they need to get their crops in and out of the ground, but in their healthcare and telemedicine and water conservancy and soil conservancy and so many other things that are in both versions of the Farm Bill, many of those my bills.
Thank you. Candidate Evans, same question. Do you oppose or support the Farm Bill? And please explain.
So I actually raise cows right now. I have a few beef cows. My grandparents raised cattle. I worked on a ranch when I was growing up in my college years before I joined the Army. And as the current state representative for a big chunk of Adams and Weld County right now, I know how critically important this measure is to making sure that our farmers and ranchers can continue to provide the food that feeds us to everyday Coloradans. And to do so at a lower price, because that's, cutting the red tape and giving them the resources they need is critical to making sure that we can bring some food prices down right now. One of the big concerns that I hear when I talk to my constituents in the farming and ag community is that the Farm Bill oftentimes is geared toward a lot of the larger producers, but there needs to be more resources and programs available for a lot of the medium to small producers. As we look at the agricultural landscape in Colorado, we see this continuing urge for just larger and larger farms. The family farm is in danger. And so being able to protect those smaller operators through the Farm Bill is critical.
Thank you, Candidate Evans. Moving right on to our next question, starting with Candidate Evans. What ideas do you have to reform the U.S. immigration system?
So my grandfather, Cuauhtemoc Chavez, he was born in Chihuahua, Mexico. He immigrated to this country. He earned his citizenship with 2 Purple Hearts in World War II. My mom's first language was Spanish. And so from a very, very young age, it was instilled in me that we are a nation of immigrants and that what it says on the Statue of Liberty is true. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. We are that land of American opportunity. And so when I have these conversations with my family, with other members in the community, 2 things emerge. Number one, we need to secure the southern border so that folks who are trying to do it the right way aren't looking around and seeing individuals who are doing it the wrong way immediately get rewarded with taxpayer resources. Second, we have to fix the broken immigration system for those individuals who are trying to do it the right way. The fact that some of these folks are spending a decade or more in bureaucratic jail trying to do it the right way is just unthinkable. We have to reward those folks by fixing the broken immigration system.
Thank you, candidate. Moving on, Candidate Caraveo, same question. What ideas do you have to reform the U.S. immigration system?
I have a package of bills around that as well. They importantly secure the southern border to make sure that we stop the flow of fentanyl and do that in intelligent ways with new technology, not necessarily just walls, to make sure that we are doing all that we can to secure the border. It also makes sure that we are being humane as we see this migrant influx. That detention centers that very often have had reports of sexual abuse and other types of abuse, that we're holding them accountable and we're making sure to treat these people humanely. I also have written 2 letters and once again have a bill in this package that looks at funding for interior cities like Denver. Denver has had a huge influx of migrants that should not be up to local taxpayers to pay. This is a federal government issue that I want to address with my package of bills. Speaker Johnson has not brought forth a Senate bill that would have addressed many of these issues, and I plan to do it with my own package.
Thank you, candidate. Along similar lines, Candidate Caraveo, what will you do as in your second term, if reelected, to support refugees and asylum seekers in the 8th district?
Well, the Republican Party and many of the people that are backing my opponent like to spread lies and say that I am not interested in securing the southern border because I did not vote for a very draconian package of laws that would have completely undone the way that asylum works in the United States. We need to continue to have a system for people who truly are in danger if they are to go back to their home countries. But we also need to make sure that the system is fair and that people who are seeking refugee status have a real reason to be seeking that. And so much of that is taken care of by the executive order that President Biden brought forth that, quite frankly, he should have done months and months earlier. And there were many of us as Democrats urging him to do that.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Evans, same question. What will you do if elected as a U.S. representative to support refugees and asylum seekers in the 8th district?
So one of the first things that we have to do is understand that the United States has a lot of partner nations. You can seek asylum in Mexico. There's other countries where we have treaties and there's agreements that can provide asylum. And so we have to ensure that we are working with our partners in places like Mexico to reinstitute policies like remain in Mexico. If you're seeking asylum, you can stay in Mexico while we evaluate your asylum claim. And then if you qualify for asylum in the United States, then by all means, you can come to the United States. But we have to work with our international partners to be able to do this. We also have to make sure that we're approaching this from a common sense perspective. We had a lot of folks in Afghanistan and the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan who fought shoulder to shoulder with US armed forces for decades and who had extreme difficulty in getting asylum to come here to the United States, the Afghan interpreters, folks like that. So we need to make sure that we are taking care of our allies. We're working diplomatically to solve this problem. You solve this at the border, and from that big perspective, it will help here in the 8th Congressional.
Thank you, Candidate Evans. How will you address cost? We'll start with Candidate Evans for this one. How will you address cost of living issues in the 8th District? What will you do to ensure access to affordable basic needs?
The 8th Congressional District has the 4th highest energy producing county in the nation. It has the 8th highest ag producing county in the nation. And it has the only county in all of Colorado with all 6 interstate systems that run through it. The 8th literally does provide those building blocks, energy, food, transportation, that allow our modern society to flourish. And unfortunately, those industries are just being crushed right now by leftist punitive overregulation. On the energy sector alone, the 8th Congressional District has lost billions of dollars. I've had conversations with my fire chiefs in Weld and Adams County who have taken double-digit losses as a result of overregulation of the American energy sector. We need to allow our economy to flourish. We need to promote American energy, American agriculture, American jobs again. We need to cut the punitive red tape and overregulation. When you do that and our economy can actually function again, you will see the cost of living go down. You will see the jobs and the salaries go up.
Thank you, Candidate. Candidate Caraballo, same question. How do you plan to go about addressing cost of living issues in the 8th District? Specifically, what will you do to ensure access to affordable basic needs?
Well, as I spoke about earlier, I have a number of bills around affordable housing that look at extending tax credits and making sure that we are incentivizing the building of affordable housing here in Colorado and across the country. I also have a package of bills that address the cost of insurance, car insurance here in Colorado. In fact, President Trump, who endorsed my candidate, the day that I was introducing a bill around car insurance prices and making sure that we look at what the costs what the drivers are of increased cost, talked about how important it was to address the cost of insurance, of car insurance. I'm also looking at childcare, a huge issue for the families that I saw in my clinic. And something that I am making sure to invest in both in the Farm Bill around rural childcare and in urban areas.
Thank you, Candidate. Starting with you for this, I believe this is our last question. What approaches would you support to reducing gun violence?
You know, we have an epidemic of gun violence in the United States. As a pediatrician, I didn't think that I would get to a point where the leading cause of death for children in the United States at all ages is gun deaths. That encompasses accidental shootings and suicides. And so I introduced a package of bills looking specifically at youth mental health issues to address the epidemic that we've had of suicides in Colorado and across the country. I also am a co-sponsor of the assault weapons ban, because even though I am a supporter of the Second Amendment, and my dad and my brother are very responsible gun owners, there is no reason to have a gun that is made for warfare in the hands of Coloradans and people across the country that then is used to injure children and as part of many, many school shootings that really just need to stop.
Thank you, Candidate. Candidate Evans, same question. What measures do you support to reducing gun violence?
I'm a father of two boys, and more than that, during my time as a police officer, we actually didn't have enough school resource officers to cover all of our schools because of some defund the police policies. And so I volunteered to serve as a part-time resource officer for a couple of different schools. And so I know a couple of things. Number one, here in Colorado, there have been a double-digit number of gun control bills passed in the last decade. And while there's been a double-digit number of gun control bills passed, gun violence in Colorado has actually more than doubled. And so, as I said earlier, when we're flying helicopters, we ask what works. It's clear that the current approach is not working. And so I support things like actually holding the criminals who are committing these crimes accountable. I support not giving guns back to convicted drug dealers and to convicted auto thieves. And I support empowering our law enforcement to actually be able to hold violent criminals accountable. I brought a bill this year that said if you're a repeat violent felon, you should not be let out of jail for free. The progressive left killed my bill.
Thank you, candidate. We are a little bit ahead of schedule, so I would love to, instead of 1 minute for our closing statements, give candidates 2 minutes. And let's start with candidate Evans. You have 2 minutes for a closing statement.
Well, again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight to listen to this dialogue. This is what representative government is about. Being able to listen to where candidates stand so that voters can make an informed decision about who they think best represents them. You've heard my background, born and raised here in Colorado, grandson of immigrants from Mexico, married with 2 boys, 12 years in the US Army and the Colorado Army National Guard, another 10 years in law enforcement with the city of Arvada. When I was a cop and people called me, they didn't ask if I was a Republican or a Democrat. I didn't ask if they were a Republican or a Democrat. What mattered was, how do we work together to solve these issues and make our community a good place to live? One of the statistics I'm most proud of during my time in law enforcement is that out of thousands of calls that I went to, I only ever got into 2 fights. It's because I can work with anybody to be able to find these common sense collaborative solutions. I'm in a super minority in the state capitol, and I still got almost 60% of my bills passed. 2/3 of the current mayors in the district are supporting me because they know I'm going to give them better representation. And I was able to make an alliance with the Libertarian Party candidate who also agreed that I'm going to be able to represent them better. I'm focused on making our communities a safe, affordable place to live, work, and raise families again. That means getting our crime under control. That we're the 3rd most dangerous state in the nation is just unthinkable to me. The fact that we have one of the highest costs of living is something that I feel on a day-to-day basis when I'm trying to feed my kids. And the fact that we have a wide open southern border that's admitting gang members and drug dealers and fentanyl into our community that is the #1 killer of Americans ages 18 to 45 is unthinkable. I stood up for our community in the military and law enforcement. I'll continue to do that in Congress. electgabeevans.com is my website, electgabeevans.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, candidate Evans. Candidate Caraveo, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Well, thank you once again to everyone who put in such hard work to get this forum together. And thank you for to everybody who has been here tonight listening to the differing opinions, but 2 individuals who at the end of the day love Colorado, love this country, and want to serve it as best as we can. You know, politics was never really my plan. I decided when I was 3, the child of immigrants, my dad having worked as a construction worker for 51 years, and put 4 kids through college, that I wanted to live out my parents' American dream as a pediatrician. And I strove my entire life to make that dream a reality based on the hard work of my parents and a working class community around me. But as I practiced medicine, I saw that that American dream that I had lived was really slipping out of reach for so many of the kids that I was seeing in clinic every day, whether I was talking to them about homelessness, about the cost of prescription drugs, about how government was not propping them up the way that they had been promised, essentially, as they were growing up. It was heartbreaking to see that every single day. And so I left clinic and made sure to serve my community in the state house, and now have had the incredible honor to serve you all for the last 2 years in Congress. I hope to be given 2 more years to continue the work that, even though I've been in the minority, 2/3 of my bills have Republicans on them. I passed a law in one of the most do-nothing Congresses under Republican rule since the Civil War, and I will continue to do that work to bring over $6 million of federal money back to my constituents through constituent work, and through community projects, over $120 million of investments right here in the 8th.
Thank you, Candidate Caraveo. And that concludes tonight's Candidate Forum. We hope all of you who are attending were able to learn a little bit more about each candidate, because this is, an important position in an important election in an important district, and an important state, of course. And with that, just want to thank both of you, Candidate Caraveo, Candidate Evans. Always a pleasure. And thank you so much for your time here tonight, and, just your willingness to serve this beautiful state that we all call home. Now I'll hand it over to Linda Shapley, publisher of Colorado Community Media, another very important community institution, to close out our evening. Linda.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Lucas. We really appreciate your time and expertise in moderating this forum, and certainly in all of the coverage that you're providing for Northern Colorado. On behalf of Colorado Community Media and our 24 titles across the Front Range, I'd like to thank our partners, KUNC and El Seminario, as well as the Leagues of Women Voters of Colorado and Adams, Greeley-Weld, and Larimer counties. And thank you to the many volunteers who gave their time and their expertise to make this forum happen. So special thanks to Barbara Winnery and Kathleen Milligan. And thank you to the audience for your interest in attending this forum. We applaud your efforts to inform yourselves. And certainly, as we come hurtling toward the election day, there's still a lot more to learn. We'd like to remind those attending the forum that the views expressed this evening are those of the candidates and not necessarily the sponsoring organizations. Some of the positions expressed here may be considered opinions and not facts agreed upon by experts. We encourage all voters here to learn more and do their own research to get factual information. You can find this forum, we've recorded it, and it will go on to vote411.org or on the League's YouTube channel. Also, we'll have links to it in our websites at coloradocommunitymedia.com. And remember that you are the one who helps make democracy work by making your voice heard. So get out there and vote. And thank you very much for attending the event.
Thank you all.